This is Zen'n'ish.
Welcome to Zen'n'ish podcast, where we bring insightful conversations to spark clarity, healing, and growth. Today, we're joined by Atara Parkinson, a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified integrative practitioner, passionate about the connection between metabolic and mental health. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Atara, we're thrilled to have you here, and I'm hoping that you can open up by sharing a bit about yourself, your journey, and what drives your passion for this work.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Atara, and I've been in the field of mental health for 14 years, which makes me feel so old, right? When I say that. It just flew by. And in my work, I have loved it. I've gotten to do a number of things from community clinics all the way to private practice and some stuff in between. My work really developed into what it is now because of some of my own experiences. And I think that's so true for so many in the holistic space. In 2013, I am a postgraduate, right? I've just completed my program. I am gearing up to get married and planning a wedding. And it was awesome, except that my health completely tanked. And when I say that, Dr. Kiki, I mean, I could not get out of bed for more than 2 hours at a time. My body was so exhausted, so depleted. And I would get up, get going for my day, and be so tired, I would have to lay down again and take a nap. Now, for a 20-something-year-old, I'm going, this is not normal. What is happening here? Go to my doctor. He says, great, we're going to run some labs. So I said, awesome, come back in a few weeks. And he kind of almost shrugs his shoulder at me and goes, I don't know. Everything looks great. And I think this is a story of so many. And I went, no, not everything is not great. I'd always been really high energy, really achiever. You could probably hear it in the way that I'm talking right now. I've never lacked energy. So I said, what the heck is going on? And so I got connected to an alternative practitioner, and we got to run some other labs. And essentially we looked at my neurotransmitters and saw that my fight or flight transmitters were through the roof. Literally, they were off the charts. You could not even see where they ended. They were so high. And my calming neurotransmitters were bottomed out. They were non-existent. And this was alarming. Obviously, I could just look at that and be like, that's not normal. And the other really obvious thing for me was we charted my sleep, and I was waking up 17 times in the night. Yep. And this was because my body was in this fight or flight mode, and everything that was working to keep me calm had been in such a stress production state, it couldn't keep up anymore. And that basically just stopped working. So this is what got me on this journey. And I did a lot of great correcting there, taking out processed foods, incorporating whole foods, good, solid nutrition in my life. And I improved dramatically. We fast forward a few years later to 2016. I'm now married and I'm pregnant with my first. Have the baby, and I then experienced pretty severe postpartum anxiety. Now, at the time, this was like 8-9 years ago, I did not have the language, even being in mental health, of postpartum anxiety. At that time, we just kind of talked about postpartum depression.
Right.
And so I didn't understand fully what was happening for me. But when I say postpartum anxiety and rage, and I've learned since that anger and rage comes out of the anxiety. So when I felt out of control of the situation, that's when I would respond to that anxiety with waves of anger. And this was looking like unable to keep calm, reactive to people in my life. I was bothered by the smallest inconveniences, snappy constantly with my partner, paralyzed by decision-making, constantly guilt-ridden, right, for how I was treating those around me. And it also felt like my brain was constantly in fast-forward mode. Like I couldn't slow down, and my thoughts would just boom, 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 boom. And I'd be thinking about all the what ifs, right, coming up in my life. And I give this example because it typically resonates with mom. When my husband would ask, you want to go over to my parents for the day, the thoughts in my head would go, well, what if it collides with his nap time? What if I can't get him to sleep there? What if he'll be overtired? And then that will have severe neurological long-term impacts, right? Because sleep is so important. He'll be fussy and then I'll be irritated. And then what if he doesn't go to, or what if he does go to sleep and then, but everyone's loud and wakes him up? But also, oh my gosh, I don't want to miss connecting with other adults because I am by myself with this baby all day. And I miss having, connection with people, but also I miss having time to myself. Do I want that more? Oh my gosh, why is this so hard? Why does this feel so overwhelming? Why can't I enjoy life anymore? And on, right? With all of these thoughts and questions. So clearly this was not an ideal way of existing. It was filled with shame, isolation, and overwhelm. And thankfully that, however, led me to the realization, first and foremost, that I found minerals and the importance of minerals for the body and therefore for mental health, but also metabolic health, right? So that is kind of where I started in this, and I'll pause there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
So when we look at metabolic health, it's kind of a concept many of us don't immediately link to mental health. So could you explain this connection and why it's so important?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love starting this conversation by a quote from Dr. Heyman, which he's a famous naturopath, I think is his title. And he says, stress is the body's inability to make energy for the mind to respond to its environment. And I just love that. So potent, right? And it's this great example of the interplay between body and mind. So metabolic dysfunction is essentially the body in distress. The body is not able to make the energy it needs, thus creates mental health disorders. And we'll get a little bit more into the nitty gritty there in a second. But this happens, I want to be clear, this does not happen overnight. This is a process that happens over a long period. And there's typically multiple factors that are coming into play. So when we hear people say metabolism, we often think of what? What do you think of?
I think of like a slow metabolism, gaining weight, lethargic kind of thing.
Exactly. Absolutely. And so we think of digestion and we think of our interactions with food. And that certainly is true, but it's actually only one small piece of metabolism. Metabolism is much more complex and multifaceted. It is the body's many processes to take nutrients and turn it into different substances in the body, not just energy. And what's crucial to understand here is with brain energy, the role of mitochondria in the body. Most people know and understand mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell because it makes ATP, which is the energy carrying molecule for our body. Right. However, mitochondria is also responsible for making many molecules like serotonin, dopamine, cortisol. And now, yes, now I see your eyes lighting up because you're going, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. I know those because we know those well in mental health, don't we? And let me say, not just producing these molecules, but regulating these molecules. So mitochondria is responsible for producing and regulating. So how does metabolic health impact mental health? Well, when metabolism isn't properly functioning, it doesn't allow the body to produce the hormones and neurotransmitters required for mental stability. Now that is a new concept to mental health. Yeah. It's well documented, right? Yeah, that individuals with mental health diagnoses don't produce enough serotonin and dopamine, for example. But the question that we've not been able to answer yet is why? Why are people's brains not able to produce these things in the correct amounts that we need? And to go back to my personal story, right? I gave the example of my fight or flight neurotransmitters being off the charts. This meant my body was constantly in that fight or flight mode. And what happened was my body didn't have the resources needed to properly function. And then my metabolic health started to tank. So my body went into like a panic mode, and my stress hormones just kept producing. And my calming neurotransmitter hormones stopped, right? Or basically, weren't functioning any longer. And I want to pause here and say, yes, that was happening at that moment in time, but there was like this array of factors that that impacted this process. For example, I had some years of childhood trauma, domestic violence in my home. I mentioned my eating habits earlier, right? I'm talking years, right? All the way into my childhood of eating processed foods and non-nutrient dense foods. I mentioned the stress of my graduate program. We noticed, right, about within the year after that. We think that's coincidence? Absolutely not. I mentioned lack of sleep, binge drinking was also happening to cope with all the stress I was under, and excessive workouts. Like I was training for marathons at this point in my life. And then the last final thing that pushed me right off the cliff was the pregnancy. And women are in an extra vulnerable state in pregnancy to metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot to think about, like right there. Yeah.
It is. It's so much. And let me say, Dr. Kiki, right? The brain is all about precise control. Okay. Brain cells need to be turned on at appropriate times and off at appropriate times. And if this is like piquing your interest, if you're like, whoa, what the heck? I highly encourage you to go pick up the book that is like the groundbreaking, book on this topic. It's called Brain Energy by Dr. Chris Palmer. And he's a psychiatrist out of Harvard he said this research has been there for hundreds of years, but he took it and put it all together and helps us look at what exactly is happening. How is this happening? Right. And I love this example that he gives that is about sleep and dreams. And what he says is, have you ever thought about how your dreams are comparable to psychotic symptoms? Yeah. We're seeing things, right? That aren't really there, right? Like what? We're hearing things, we're hallucinating. But what the difference is that our brain is doing that at the correct time when we're asleep. And so he puts out, what if psychotic symptoms were just the brain misfiring while a person was awake instead of asleep? And that speaks to the precision and the importance of what, the brain's functioning. If those are going off at the wrong time, we're seeing psychotic symptoms. And that would be very, very alarming, right? So sometimes the next question is, sure, Atara, I got this, but how do we how are we calling that the brain and metabolic health is responsible for like all mental health symptoms? Because mental health symptoms can look so different, right? Depression and anxiety, we're seeing, a lowering of energy versus like a hypervigilance or almost a franticness, right? And so what happens is the brain can respond differently depending on what has happened, based on the food we've given it, based on situation. I mentioned alcohol, right? Based on substances and so on and so forth. So it's really interesting. Some brain cells actually become overactive when they don't have enough energy instead of that underactive depressive symptoms. And this is what I saw and experienced, right? We call this hyperexcitability. And hyperexcitability has been documented in the brains of epileptics, those with PTSD, schizophrenia, bipolar, autism, OCD, and Alzheimer's. Now, when we think of those, that's a really wide range of symptoms. Yeah, really, right? And there's some overlap, but there's some really different symptoms. But what we know is that the brain pathways, the anxiety pathway, for example, might cause anxiety symptoms. But it's possible that those are that's the same brain pathway that is causing the OCD or the epilepsy, just depending on the person's body. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very cool. Wow. So I know that in your work, there's a lot of focus or looking at and researching magnesium.
Yes,
And so I'm just
ma'am.
wondering if you could talk about how it does play a critical role in brain function.
Mhm.
And can you
Mhm.
just kind of elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a really practical example, which I think we've all experienced at some point, right?
Mhm.
Have you ever been late?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right? Every human. Yes, I have. Okay. Maybe you wake up late, or maybe you lost track of time and you're rushing out the door, right? You're trying to grab everything you need. You go through your checklist quickly. You have a meeting. You got to make sure you look presentable. You
Mhm.
think about what you might need for the day. You're going to be gone until dinner time. If you're like me and you have kids, you're yelling at them, get your shoes on or your toothbrush, right? This is a stressed state. And in this state, we are using up our mineral stores because minerals are actually protective for the body and for the mind. And
Mhm.
my little like catchphrase I love to use is minerals make your mental health resilient, right? Because we're all going to experience stress. We cannot stop that from happening. But it's how am I going to respond to the stress? Do I have twofold the tools I need, right? But
Right.
also, is my body, like I mentioned that first quote, is my body capable of responding to this stress? So, for example, magnesium is a great one, getting a lot of airtime right now. Magnesium changed my life. Magnesium supports neurotransmitter synthesis. So, the ability of those firing neurotransmitters to communicate and have that process, nerve transmission, neuromuscular connection or conductivity, the ability to move my body across the room requires magnesium. Something that people often complain of is muscle cramps,
Yes.
Charlie horses. Yes, magnesium. You're probably deficient in magnesium if
Mhm.
that's one of the things that is happening for you. So, magnesium is actually required for over 50% of the functions in our body. Over 50%. That's a lot. So it's
Yes.
pretty darn important. Magnesium also for mental health produces like a calming effect. So if someone's coming to me and they're saying, Atara, I'm really struggling with anxiety, or OCD would be an example, that's one of the first things I'm going to start with is making sure we're getting some more magnesium in their bodies to
Mhm.
help that brain just kind of take a breath and calm down. Now,
Mhm.
there are different forms of magnesium, so
Yes, I
that's
was going to ask
important.
about
Yes,
that.
yeah, nuance, and they kind of can have some different effects. For example, I have a magnesium that I take in the morning because it's energizing magnesium versus a magnesium that I will take in the evening for that calming effect. It also helps our sleep big time, right? People are taking things like melatonin and not a problem, but we're not actually correcting the root cause here when we take something like that. And the root cause often is mineral imbalances which impact metabolic health
Mhm.
and mitochondria functioning. Minerals are required to go into the cell and interact with that mitochondria to produce again the things that our bodies need to function properly and for our mental health to function properly.
Right. Okay. So instead of like being a band-aid, they're actually nutrients and nourishing and replenishing.
Exactly. Spot on.
Yeah. Nice. So let's look at like intersection a bit.
Mhm.
How do you see the intersection of physical and mental health shaping the future of therapy and healing?
Oh, man, I love that question. It is, in my opinion, it's everything
Mhm.
because it's so important that we're treating both body and mind together. They are not separate. And we
Right.
do a great job in our culture, right? Of,
Yes.
okay, go see your cardiologist, go see your neurologist, go see your endocrinologist, right? And we separate it all up
Mhm.
instead of taking a step back and going, okay, as a whole picture, what is happening here and how are these impacting one another. And so that is the work that I'm so passionate about and I do. And I'm really excited that there's this wave happening of practitioners on both sides of in the physical body side and in the mental health world coming together and saying, how can we collaborate? How can we work together? And that's the beauty. I just love this so much. I work with two holistic practitioners, and they work from the body side, and I work with the mind side. So our patients get both of these, right? At the same time, they're able, again, to have someone walking you through, looking at your labs, looking at, okay, what minerals are imbalanced that we need to increase or decrease here. And then also let's have the skills so that when I am stressed and running out the door, I'm not sitting in the corner crying, right? I'm able to, to be resilient here, to think of some action steps. But even to get to that, like, can I think of these action steps? Minerals are required to think clearly. And I didn't get through them. We talked about magnesium, but I love talking about what's called the crucial four. Okay. And the other three players here in the crucial four are, we talked about magnesium, then we have potassium. 98% of Americans do not get their daily recommended amounts of potassium. That's a lot of people. Yeah. That's a lot of people. And I was one of them for the longest time. And in my journey right now, I got my magnesium down and now I'm focusing, okay, got to get the potassium up, right? Mm-hmm. So potassium helps you think clearly, helps you utilize your memory and not, again, get swept up in that chaos. Potassium also helps quiet down neurons to support healthy sleep, to support circadian rhythm. I think most people know too, potassium for the muscles, right? Yep. And what I love about minerals is they are foundational and they're all encompassing. So they're going to impact every single system in your body, not just one. And you can hear it in the way I'm talking. Your neurological system is going to be impacted, but so is your endocrine system, the way that you're able to produce hormones. So is your muscular system is going to be impacted by that same mineral. So they are heavy hitters, so to speak. Yes. Calcium, right? Calcium, if you have calcium imbalance too high or too low, it could look like irritability. It could look like being stressed all the time. It can produce rumination, right? Our fancy therapy land word for being stuck in a thought and continuing that thought, right? Even, into the afternoon. Oh my gosh, why didn't my kids listen? And that's the reason we're late. And how come the alarm doesn't go off? Rumination. Mm-hmm. You are also more likely to be anxious at night or the next day about the same situation without the protection of calcium.
I'm going to start using that when I'm irritable. I'm like, I just
my calcium's imbalanced, right? Yes, exactly. And the last one of the crucial four is sodium. Okay, it protects your nervous system. It keeps you better regulated. Again, so you're not sitting in that corner. And I want to go back and offer some practical solutions for some of these. Magnesium, we talked about some supplementation, but some easy other ways and safe ways to get magnesium in is actually mineral waters. Okay. And so, are you familiar with Gerolsteiner?
Yes. Here,
yes.
Definitely.
I was going to say, you're in that part of the world. Yes. So you'll see that. But actually, stateside, we have a lot of that too. For I've heard people getting it at the bargain market for a couple dollars for a pack of them. And that's one of my current obsessions. A lot of minerals available there. Stateside, we also have from Mexico spring water called Topo Chico. These are great. You can kind of play and look at the different mineral waters out there, but these are some of my favorites. The other great way to get magnesium is called transdermal or through the skin. So you can use a magnesium lotion. My kids get it every night on their armpits or their ankles because that's where the skin is thinnest. You can also throw Ancient Minerals is the brand, and they have a wonderful bath flake that they're magnesium flakes you can throw in the bath. If you're a mama, just throw your feet over the side of the bathtub and do a foot soak. Yeah. And that everyone's getting their hit of magnesium, right? Really great. Potassium. What do you think of when I say potassium? What food source?
A banana.
Bananas, of course. Yes. Well, unfortunately, Dr. Kiki, most of that potassium is in the peel. Are you eating the peel of your banana?
No, I give that to my plants.
Exactly. Yes. And that's why as well, just
Yes.
FYI, plants love it because it has the potassium the plants need to thrive.
Mhm.
And so some other really great potent sources for a good hit of potassium are potatoes. When
Okay.
I say potatoes, what do you think? How do you feel about that?
I'm shocked. Most
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Do you enjoy potatoes?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Most people, when I say potatoes, they're like, awesome. That's so exciting to learn because our bodies intuitively know what they need. So when you're finding yourself drawn to, and let me qualify this, a whole food,
Right.
meaning a food coming straight, an animal food or a plant food coming straight from the earth. I'm not talking about potato chips, but you are craving the potato chips for a reason,
Mhm.
right? Because you're craving the potassium from potatoes and salts, right? And
Yes.
so again, I don't want to demonize any food here. If you want to reach for a bag of potato chips and that's where you're at, do so. I give you permission. But if you're in the phase of like, well, I want to start to move towards maybe a more nourishing food, cook up some potatoes or sweet potatoes. And I like to batch cook. So I'll cook like 4 or 5 sweet potatoes for the week because I love sweet potatoes even more.
Yes.
And I'll pull out, yeah, one a morning, and I'll have my protein, sausage, bacon, leftover steak, whatever's there, and then I'll have my sweet potato, and I'll slap a bunch of grass-fed butter on there because grass-fed butter is wonderfully nourishing for our brain. We probably won't even get to healthy fats today, but healthy fats so important. Your brain, friends, is 70% fat and cholesterol. We need those healthy fats to fuel our brain.
Mhm.
And then some salt and pepper, right? And oh my gosh, so good. I love it. It nourishes me. It makes me feel good.
Yes.
Another great source of potassium. How do you feel about coconut water?
I don't like it.
Not a fan. That's okay. That's all right. So some of us are, and then we'll
Now,
whittle it
a
down.
fresh coconut, yes. I absolutely love
Oh,
it. Yeah, Thailand.
okay. There, yes, exactly that type. Yeah, so put a straw in there, sip it down, eat that coconut. Let's see. One more would be what's my other bacon. People love bacon.
Yes.
Why do we all love bacon? Hi, we're all deficient. Not all. That's a joking statement, but
Right.
most of us are deficient in potassium and B vitamins.
Yes.
B vitamins super high in bacon.
I
And
didn't know
that's why
that.
we love it, especially in the morning time, because both of those things are energy for us.
Mm.
Yep. Calcium sources. I mean, these are pretty obvious. Get your dairy in, and I'm going to qualify that with a good dairy, meaning not terribly processed or pasteurized. I go for raw personally in our household, but I know people have different feelings on that. Kefir, yogurt,
Mm.
fermented dairies are wonderful for us. There's also some mineral waters with super high calcium in there. And then these little canned fish. And depending on what part of the world you're in, some people love it, some people hate it. But those are like sardines,
Mhm.
mackerel in the can is really high in calcium. And
Okay.
then obviously sodium, people know salt, right? Here's the thing, we want to be getting an unprocessed salt. So that most of the table salts that you're seeing out there are highly processed. Ideally, we're getting a salt that comes straight from the earth. Some great brands are Baja Gold. Salt is one of my favorites.
Mhm.
You're also getting other trace minerals in these salts because
Oh.
they're not getting processed out, which is really cool.
Mhm.
Redmond's is from Salt Lake City, up near me. And then we also have Celtic sea salt is a popular one that
Yes.
comes straight from the sea. So
Yeah.
those are some good examples there.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And, thinking about all of this and going back to that question of intersectionality,
Yeah.
I think it's so important. Many things have stood out so far in this conversation, but
Mm-hmm.
when you were talking about the neural pathways and how um, it could be the same ones, but it manifests differently in,
Yes.
each individual. And I think that that's also a testament to going back to like looking holistically at a person
Exactly.
and stop,
Yes.
like piecemealing and parceling it out.
Right.
even if there are people who are specialized, there needs to be conversations about people and looking at this whole person and how all of this comes together in this person
Absolutely.
in order to have true healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I love doing in my practice as well is if I don't know something, I'm going to be the first person to say, I don't know, but I am going to find out for you. Or I'm going to talk to one of your practitioners. Maybe you have a specialist. You're really struggling with hormones and you're working with an endocrinologist. I'm going to go talk to that person with your permission. And we're going to collaborate. And I'm going to say, what are you seeing? What do you know? And then I'm going to apply the knowledge that I have to help with that.
Awesome.
But I think it's so important, when we're helping people to be comfortable with saying, I don't know. And let's find that out for you, because we don't know it all. There's no way. And where can we reach in our community, in that person's community, for support in that specific way?
Great. Yes. So I have another question for you. So in your view, why does our culture need to shift its approach to treating mental health disorders? Are these conditions truly incurable? As they often say, you're stuck with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You just got to deal with that and take your meds for the rest of your life.
Right.
Right. And that is why there's the need, is because we are, people would say the most advanced we've ever been. And yet we're the sickest we've ever been. I don't want to get this stat wrong, but I think it's something like 70 to 80% of Americans are on one or more medications. Whoa. That's a lot. Again, a lot of people. And we're not deficient, right? We're not deficient in Xanax. We're not deficient in Zoloft or any other medication. Right. You're not deficient in your hormone med. Like, that's a synthetic substance. What is happening in my body? That's what we need to be asking ourselves, that got me to this place. And that is why this is so important. And to go into mental health specifically for a minute, is I think we have lived the past 50 to 100 years with the mindset of, well, this is just the way it is. And this is something I have to deal with then for the rest of my life. And I'm here, and many other practitioners are out there to tell you, no, first of all, it doesn't have to be this way. And also, your bipolar, your schizophrenia, your OCD, depression, anxiety, even autism and ADHD. We have records of people that are really downgrading some of these symptoms. And I'm trying to be very careful in the way I'm speaking here, because we also know, Dr. Kiki, working in mental health, that mental health diagnoses are being human to some extent. And we all fall on a range of being human. For example, ADHD, I have a little bit of ADHD tendencies, is how I call it, right? I move fast. Yeah. I jump from thing to thing, but I don't meet criteria. But so we want to just be careful not to pathologize every single little thing out there, Absolutely. But to understand that some of these are being human. But again, in Brain Energy, Dr. Chris Palmer has literally cured people, which is the coolest thing to say out loud. With psychotic symptoms, with diet. Whoa, like, just astounding. And his work really is emphasized on ketogenic. And I won't get into the weeds too much of that, but if that's something that interests you, another great source is a group called Metabolic Mind. And they have really great podcasts. Also articles, a lot into the nuances here of why ketogenic is so powerful for people with severe mental health, psychotic symptoms. That's not the population I generally work with. I'm generally working with depression, anxiety, right? A lot of postpartum mamas I get. And so we're dealing with some of more the energy, how we get our energy back. And I do diet, right? I do recommend diet shifts and the minerals. But I want to say and be clear, I don't believe everybody out there should be jumping on a ketogenic diet just because you're struggling with depression. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It always makes me think, even if the path for a person is, medical assistance, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think a great question to always ask is, if we're looking at medicine, what is it replacing that I might be lacking or deficient in? And starting with that question. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And what's amazing too is, we don't want to just pull someone off all their meds.
Oh, no.
No, right away. But we can start supporting the body. And then by working with their psychiatrist or medical
Yes.
prescribing doctor can start to talk about, can we start to wean this down and bring this down so that then we don't have to take that for the rest of our life. And I've seen that process several times, and it's so, gosh, just empowering, right?
Yeah.
And so hope filled for the person that is
Absolutely.
willing to go down this path.
Yes, I agree. So you just mentioned, you talked about like your work around or working with postpartum mothers and clients struggling with anxiety. And I was wondering if you could share with us one or two stories that kind of illustrate the transformative potential with this holistic approach.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to what I kind of stated earlier, which is that pregnant and postpartum mamas are some of the most vulnerable population when it comes to metabolic and mitochondrial health. Pregnancy, again, is a stress state for the body. And during pregnancy, resources are allocated to building the baby. Makes sense, right? So more nutrients is required. And then if a mom is already deficient, she's going to feel the impact of those deficiencies even more so in pregnancy. Women lose 10% of their mineral stores in pregnancy alone. That's not even looking at if we're breastfeeding and what's happening in that process. Yeah. So we'll see moms complain of symptoms like mom brain, right? That is neurological functioning being impacted. I had that pretty severely. I would put my keys funny places. I would forget files at work, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I forget names all of a sudden. I was like, what is happening? But some other things that moms struggle with: hair loss, nails, and skin. Well, all of these are indicators that our metabolic health and our minerals are not supported in the body. Exactly. So one of my favorite stories is, of course, mine, right? Because I had, I have four children total. My first two, pretty severe postpartum anxiety. My third, I had started to make those dietary changes we talked about, but I didn't have the minerals yet. And so while I was better functioning, I still struggled with some postpartum anxiety. And then we fast forward to my fourth baby, where I had zero symptoms postpartum, which was it was huge for me. It was eye-opening to have a postpartum and go, whoa, it doesn't have to be that way. My other favorite stories, I have a mama, and she has had three, and her postpartum experiences were actually different every time. So with her first, she had a lot of anxiety. With the second, she had a lot of the rage and anger coming up. And then with the third, she's had more depressive symptoms. And so it has shifted and changed. And I imagine too, that has to do with her mineral stores. But so I talked a little bit, right? I would start with something like magnesium with an anxiety. What would we do for depressive symptoms? Well, we would get the body back into getting comfortable and supported in the energy production. Because when you think about depression, it's drained. There's a lot of heaviness, a lot of lack of motivation, the sadness that is so common, and despair, hopelessness. And so for those, we're going to do something more energizing. And these are going to sound really weird. Bear with me, everybody. But oysters.
Oh, okay.
Oysters, are a powerhouse food. Now, if you automatically cringe when I say that, it's okay. Now, if you love oysters, good. Go buy some oysters and pound them. You can get them fresh. You can get them canned. I have people that love to crush oysters on like a cracker, and it's almost like it ends up like a spread of the oysters in oil, and that ends up being really good for people. But if all of that you're like, Atara, I cannot. It's okay. There's oyster supplements. So you can actually get oyster in a pill. It's just I always not dehydrated, but basically so that it takes all the moisture out. So it can be crumbled up and then put into a capsule.
Freeze dried?
So it's just freeze dried. Thank you. There it is. Yes. Freeze dried. A freeze dried oyster into a capsule, and then you can just swallow those down easy peasy in the morning. And that's another way to get the oysters. Why oysters? Oysters have the perfect combination of copper to zinc ratio. Both copper and zinc are super important to energy production and mitochondrial health. We do not want to be going out and taking a bunch of synthetic supplements. That to me is the same version as what we do in allopathic medicine, right? Oh, just take this pill, just take this pill. How can we be changing our diet and learning how to eat to nourish our body? Yeah. That is what I walk clients through, is a process of just making little switches here and there so that we're supporting the body. And then the other thing is beef organs. Okay. Again, people go, what? Or
I just read like a whole article about that.
Did you? Do you remember kind of what was in there?
I know that I tried to buy it here and couldn't.
Oh, no.
I don't remember. I just remember reading it. To be honest, I think I started hearing about it on TikTok. And so I started doing research, about it. But it's supposed to be really good for you.
Yeah, they are. So historically, if we rewind, 50, 70 years ago, people were eating organ meats on a regular basis. My mom still talks about, ooh, cringe, liver night.
Liver, right? Yes.
Liver night, liver and onions, really classic. Yes. That in our culture was a regular thing. And we do not eat that anymore. Probably wasn't prepared well a lot of the time. So I don't blame them. There's a couple ways to go about this. So absolutely, you can order online, again, in capsule form. Codage is a wonderful brand. Perfect Supplements is another one. So Dr. King, you look at those, see if you can get those shipped to you where you are. Now, those are great, easy if you have the budget for it, because it's already done. You can just pop them in and move on with your day. Depending on what you're struggling with, we might want to do a specific organ. So what I've heard it say this way by a nutritionist that I love. Her name's Kaylee Mason. She's Nutritional Elements on Instagram. She's a powerhouse of information. She talks about that if you have a struggling organ, eat that organ meat and it will support that part of your body. So for example, my liver was struggling for a long time, probably because of all the binge drinking I did. And so I was taking beef liver for a long time, and they call this nature's multivitamin. It has so many vitamins and minerals in it. And so I will do that, but I'll also switch off between doing just the beef liver and doing beef organs, which is a combination. And you can get those from both of those sites that I mentioned. And it will have like hearts, thymus, maybe kidney and liver all combined together for you in there. Mm-hmm. Now, if that's not an option, another way to go about this is going to your local butcher. And you will find that they often will either have it on the shelf for you to purchase, or you can ask. You can say, if it's not there, hey, do you have some hearts or liver that I can have? And they will sell it to you. And they're typically cheaper than the muscle meat. And the way that I like to do these is you could look up recipes to cook them up if you're feeling brave. If you're not, semi-defrost them, and you can cut them into swallowable bites. And right now I'm out of beef liver. So that's what I'm about to do today. I'm going to go and I'm going to cut up the liver into swallowable bites. And then when I get it into a size, I'm just going to throw it back in the freezer. And so that I can just grab, swallow, and go about my day. Make sense?
Yes, it does. That would be the way I would have to do that.
Yes, there you go. So that's another option for you. And then, yeah, looking up recipes, soups are a great way. You can often hide liver in ground beef really easily. Like if you're making a tomato sauce
Mhm.
or a soup, Perfect Supplements actually has a powder. So if you can get yours to grind down, if you have a freeze dryer or a dehydrator, you can even pull the moisture out and kind of grate it into different foods. I hide liver in my potato soup all winter long. My kids never even know. It's great.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, so for someone wanting to start improving their mental health through
Mhm.
metabolic health, what's one simple change that they could do today?
Yes. I have a little list here. And my favorites would be focusing on first and foremost changing your diet because all the supplements in the world are basically they're not going to be able to be absorbed and utilized in your body unless your digestion is on point and you're absorbing those things. So start by taking the gross stuff out,
Mhm.
okay, and adding the good stuff in. And you don't even have to talk about it like that. You can, the way that I help clients to engage is I'm nourishing my body. Not that I can't have the sugar, I can't have the cakes and cookies. That sets us up to really be at war with ourselves. But instead, to say, what do I want to nourish myself with today? And then going and having a really protein packed, healthy fat packed meal. And you'll find that as you start eating that way, your body is going to love it. So,
Yeah.
for example, I mentioned a really common breakfast for me is bacon or sausage, which I love eating, a sweet potato with butter, which I love eating, and an egg,
Mhm.
right? Maybe an egg or two. And so I'm getting a lot of protein. I'm getting those healthy fats in there, and I'm nourishing my body so I feel great, right, for the rest of the day.
Right.
Another really easy switch, we talked about fats. So taking out the processed seed oils, anything with seed oils, vegetable oil, canola oil, rapeseed oil, sunflower oil. These, unfortunately, are often rancid and toxic for our bodies. And we're going to switch that out for healthy fats. Butter, I mentioned, lard. People used to cook with lard. I hear people all there, oh, yeah, my grandma made the most
Yes.
amazing pie crust with lard.
Yeah.
Yes, she did. And your body loved it because of that lard, that healthy fat that was feeding your brain.
Mhm.
Ghee is another popular one. Olive oil, we just want to be careful how we cook with olive oil because it does have a low burn
Right.
point. But
Yeah.
avocado oil would be another one to use in the cooking if you wanted. And just start making easy switches. Again, if you look on the packages of processed foods, you're gonna see those oils in there almost all of the time. And so that's a really easy way to switch things out. We talked about focusing on nutrient dense foods and then healing the gut. Right. So we want to be able to absorb all of these things. Some great ways to help your gut heal is meat stock. Okay. And this is, again, we talk about nose to tail. We take the bones of an animal and the cartilage and joint. We throw it in a pot with some water, maybe some
Yes.
onions in there. We let it simmer for a few hours. And then we have this beautiful gut healing stock for our body. I mentioned ketogenic diet. GAPS diet is another popular one amongst people who are trying to heal gut and mental health issues. It's intense. So it's not something that I just recommend jumping into.
Right.
But if you focus on the tenets there, right? Meat stock is you're recommended to drink like 6 cups of the meat stock a day.
Now, is the meat stock, is that the same as bone broth?
It's not. Great
Oh,
question. So bone broth is typically simmered longer and about 12 to 24 hours for bone broth. Meat stock is just 3 to 4 hours typically. You're looking at less time. What happens in that process is people who are histamine sensitive
mhm.
can struggle with bone broth. But if you don't have any histamine issues, you could look up the symptoms for that. They're pretty they're varied. But you could do something shorter, and then your histamine is not getting activated in that process.
Very cool. So you've spoken about your own story and its role in shaping your work. What lessons from your personal journey kind of stand out as the most impactful for you?
Yeah, it's you're not broken and you don't have to live this way. When I realized that, I felt so empowered and I felt inspired, like I can change this. This can be different. Something we didn't even get to today was my first 3 babies were actually all in the NICU.
Oh.
And for different reasons, everyone was full term. But what I now know is that my body wasn't healthy and didn't have what it needed. And so in the birthing process, I had babies who struggled for various reasons. And the second that I got those minerals on board, I had a beautiful, healthy, redeeming, really, fourth birth. And I attribute that to this change that I was able to incorporate of getting my minerals balanced and getting those nourishing foods so that my body could do essentially what it was meant to do. I want to say too, healing does not have to be painful. I think too, in the holistic community, we kind of get into this mindset of like, well, it has to be hard or it has to be arduous. Yeah, exactly. Right. It does not. It can be enjoyable. I can take a food that I already love and make some small changes to make it nourishing for my body. A great example is cookies. Girl, I love cookies still. Yeah. I eat cookies, I don't know, twice a month or something. I make cookies. And what do we use? We use great grass-fed butter in there. I'm going to use an organic, non-processed sugar in there. I'm going to use great pastured eggs. Okay. All of these together are just going to elevate my cookie a little bit. So I'm getting more benefit. Oh, and I'm sorry, flour. That's super important too. An organic flour that's not sprayed with glyphosate. Glyphosate is a hormone disruptor. And you don't have that so much in Europe. I think glyphosate is banned in Europe, but stateside, we still use glyphosate. And so we want to just be careful and aware of the flour that we're using. So again, it's not about taking everything out and having to only eat horrible food, but it's also not putting stuff in my body that isn't serving me.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Atara, this has been such a great talk.
I'm glad.
Yes. So for listeners who are intrigued by this topic, what are the best ways to learn more about your work and connect with you?
Yeah. So I love connecting with people on social media because people can kind of get a flavor and a taste for what it is I do. And if you hear this, you're like, I'm all in, I want to do coaching, like, let's jump in. Great. Reach out to me. I'm at Atara Parkinson at protonmail.com. My website is currently under construction because I'm revamping some stuff, but in the new year, it should be up, and that's just ataraparkinson.com. That'll be up in January. Instagram is at atara.parkinson. And then my Facebook page is simple too, just my name, Atara Parkinson. On there, there's a lot of free information. For example, there's slides on benefits of a steak, benefits of eggs, right? Benefits of this. Why am I eating this? What is it doing for my body? As well as some of the other interventions we didn't even get to talk to today that I do on a therapeutic level, like Brainspotting, which is helping the brain heal from a trauma all the way to just like a negative experience or you feel stuck in a belief or a thought. That's something I also incorporate into working with people is we want to be hitting both of these simultaneously.
Oh, great. So what I'm hearing is another episode with you.
I would love it. Yes. On Brainspotting. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, girl, I could talk about that one all day too.
Awesome. So Atara, your insights have been deeply enlightening, and I truly mean that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your passion with us.
Oh my gosh.
This has
Thank
been
you
so
for giving me a
great.
place. Yes. Yeah. The more people that can know about this and have freedom, the better.
Absolutely. And thank you for tuning in to the Zen'n'ish podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review.
Zen'n'ish copyrighted podcast and website offer opinions of Dr. Lakeisha Hudson, Dr. Kiki Zen'n'ish LLC, and/or guests. Content is for information only, not medical advice. Consult a professional for health concerns. Opinions are personal and do not reflect workplaces. Privacy is a priority. All names may be altered for confidentiality, not for legal use. No guarantee of accuracy. No doctor-patient relationship established. For errors, email 423.4.doctor.kiki@gmail.com.